Constellation Energy awarded a record $1 billion to supply nuclear power to the U.S. government over the next decade. Joining us now, we want to bring in Paul Zimbardo. He is at Jefferies U.S. Power Utilities and Clean Energy Research Managing Director. Lots to get into here, but I think the big focus, and we certainly saw some of that optimism play out in the market last week on the heels of this $1 billion in contracts that was awarded to Constellation. What do you think this is indicative of, or what this tells us about the demand here for the nuclear sector at large, and whether or not we're entering here in this new into a potentially new era?
Yes, no, thank you very much for having me. And I do agree. I think 2025 is going to be a big year for nuclear, both existing nuclear as well as new nuclear. And it comes back to a topic that we've been following closely. It's just the power demand from data centers and AI is accelerating. You saw Microsoft come out with a significant increase of its capex expectations just last week. The thirst for electricity is extremely high, and there's very few sources of clean baseload electricity that is carbon free, and that's really just nuclear.
And talk to me just about how much more room to run there is for a name like Constellation, for a name like Vistra, which topped the S&P 500 year to date for 2024. Can investors still get in on these names?
In short, yes. We prefer a Vistra as well as a Talon to TLN as well. And the nice thing about them is they came from very low starting points. So yes, Vistra was one of the best performing S&P companies in 2024, but it came from a very low starting point. The market was unsure about the value of some of their gas assets, describing very low terminal values, kind of uncertainty around future gas. So we do think there's a lot more room to run for a lot of these names, especially Vistra and Talon.
What does that look like for a name like Vistra, just given the massive gains that we saw in 2024?
Yes, no, absolutely. Kind of when we look at the blue sky scenarios, what's really untapped still is the natural gas side. So what we've seen, like you mentioned, the Constellation deal with the government for nuclear energy, we still haven't seen deals from Vistra to be announced yet. We still have not seen deals for natural gas assets. The big power plants that they own, they're one of the largest owners of natural gas, where you have the potential to contract directly with a hyperscale customer. So even though it's had a significant run, great performance 2024, good start to 2025, I think there's a lot more potential once you actually have deals announced for Vistra, which we do expect in 2025.
And zooming out a bit, how much of a tailwind do you expect regulation to be under the Trump administration in particular? Because we did see some of that regulatory wrist slapping in 2024, but I like to think a lot about how when he was at the New York Stock Exchange, Trump said he wanted regulatory approval for nuclear sites within a week. Do you anticipate it being that real and bullish and positive for nuclear stocks?
Yeah, a week might be a little hard, but there's a lot of red tape with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, also for the new nuclear plants, where right now the projections are around mid-2030 before new nuclear can take a big toehold, which again is kind of the advantage of the companies like a Vistra, Talon, Constellation that actually have nuclear for sale today. So things should get better under the Trump administration on permitting, regulatory reform, et cetera. But kind of there's no real options besides the existing nuclear plant if you want to add your data centers in the next 5 to 7 years.
Well, when you take a look at the pricing here of this deal with Constellation Energy and the U.S. government, how does that compare to expectations? And what does that tell us then about maybe pricing of some of these deals that we could see to come to fruition?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. It's the number one question that we get asked all the time. So this deal was around $84 a megawatt hour. And to put that in perspective, just normal electricity in the wholesale market is around $40 to $50 a megawatt hour. So a significant premium for that clean energy, as well as kind of a nuclear upgrade, which is adding more nuclear capacity. So investor expectations for a virtual deal were probably around the $80 level. So you saw the significant outperformance that the stock had, as well as Vistra. The question really becomes, what will the hyperscalers be willing to pay? So that's what we're waiting for, the next big hyperscale deal. We saw Microsoft with a 3 Mile Island restart. We saw Talon and Amazon back in March of 2024, but we're waiting to see what the next hyperscale customer is willing to pay.
Yeah, what do you think is more likely, increased capex from the names that have already announced those deals, or a different hyperscaler jumping in here?
Really, I think both. So you've had all of the hyperscalers, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, be involved. Meta has a request for proposal for nuclear. Right. So we're really waiting to see Meta step in on the nuclear side. They made some gas announcements. So I think it's really kind of both aspects right now, because the scarcity of power is the real number one constraint when we talk to all of these companies. I think you're going to see all of the players in large size as well.
All right, Paul, we got to leave it there. Thanks so much, as always, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.